everybody, my name's Jason Zakowski. I'm the dog dad or dad guy of Bunsen and Beaker, the Twitter science dogs. Every week we bring you a fascinating guest, you get to learn a little bit about them, and then we open the floor to questions. Come learn, laugh, and interact. It's Spaces Unleashed.
Man, that picture you had of the moose with the Canada goose on its head was hilarious.
Yeah, you like that? I'll throw that up in the nest. So welcome to Spaces Unleashed. My name is Jason Zakowski. I'm the dog dad of Bunsen and Beaker, the Twitter science dogs. Once a week on Tuesday, we invite a guest to come chat about their area of expertise. This week we have Elizabeth Bourgeois, who's from way down south in the United States, Louisiana. And she's a citizen scientist, a current forensic accountant, but also does amazing work as a citizen scientist with gators and especially with birds. And we're going to get into all of that kind of stuff because in Canada, we're fresh out of gators. And
I know.
So we'll talk about that. So first off, Elizabeth, my first question is to you. When you were on the Science Pawdcast, we talked a little bit about forensic accounting. So you do that? Like you're currently still doing that? Or
I actually do. I'm also a certified fraud examiner. So I do get contacted mostly by attorneys that have cases where there's possible embezzlement or fraud. And so I get contacted and I'll start digging through financials and try to figure out, trace the money and see what happens.
So that's cool. So you wrangle ducks and gators, and then you also wrangle out the bad guys that are doing some sketchy stuff with money.
Yeah, I do. I really enjoy doing that. It's fun as being outside with the ducks and gators, but it is really interesting, and the psychology of how people get lost in doing these kind of problems, how people make bad decisions. And how they get involved in these type of schemes, and they just, become kind of basically delusional with themselves. And it's very interesting how it happens.
Okay, if there's time, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And maybe when we open up the floor to people asking questions, people might have some questions about that. So the other thing, the way that Spaces Unleashed works is we do a little interview section. I forgot to start with that. And we get to know a little bit about the guest, and then we open the floor to question audience. So as we're chatting, you might have a question that pops up or something that you wish I would have asked. So
okay.
let's get right to the big one. Can you talk to us about your work with alligators in Louisiana, Elizabeth?
Absolutely. So I started working with alligators probably around 2011. When I met my now husband. He was a nuisance alligator hunter. In the state of Louisiana, because we have such a large population of alligators now, which is actually a win for the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, because at one time they were endangered. But because we have so many now, they end up in places that they're not supposed to be, and they can pose a threat to people or to pets or to livestock. So they have alligator nuisance hunters all over the state. And my husband happened to be one of them, that he would do that in his spare time. And I don't know if I mentioned to you before, but he grew up, on the bayou. And I mean, I think he had his first pet alligator when he was 8 years old. So he's a reptile. He loves reptiles like I love ducks. And so I would go with him on calls, and the most normal calls that we get now are usually around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning from a sheriff's deputy that there's an alligator under someone's house, or it's in the street, or it's at the hospital. We had several that were at the hospital, and I don't know why they want to go and stand in front of the emergency door entrance, but they've done that before, and have to go and get them because the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries does not have enough personnel in order to deal with these type of issues. So they contract this out to people like my husband. And so we'll go and wherever the alligator is, and we'll catch it. And my husband does not like to, even if we have to euthanize an alligator, which we don't like to do, but even if we have to, we won't ever do it in front of other people. So we catch all of our gators alive, whether it's a 12.5 foot or not. You just have to be a little careful with them. But we catch them all alive. We know exactly how to handle them. It's kind of like we don't even have, just need to look at each other every now and then, tape their mouths, tie their hands behind their back, and we put them in the back of our truck and we bring them to the house. And we're lucky that we have a big piece of property, several big giant live oak trees, and we'll put essentially like a little leather collar around their neck like a dog, and we'll put a shackle with a chain to the tree until we're able, to go and relocate them, because usually at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to want to go bring an alligator to relocate. So
It's
we'll hold
kind
them.
of dark, hey?
Yeah, so we'll hold them, and usually we wait till we have like 2 or 3, but we won't hold them more than like 2 or 3 days, and then we'll relocate them, and we'll bring them either on the Atchafalaya Basin, which is the boat landing's about 10 minutes from our house, and there's thousands of acres that we can bring them there where they'll probably never see another human being again. And so, we get them out of the environment, so they're no longer a harm to people, or to animals. And then there are occasions where there'll be alligators that have been, hit by vehicles or involved in some type of accidents, or an alligator that's like emaciated. We've had 2 or 3 of those this year where we do have to euthanize them. And when we do euthanize them, I normally do a necropsy, which is absolutely fantastically amazing. So we can figure out, how they died, and we send samples out and figure out what's going on with them, just to keep a pulse on the wild alligator population in the state. Because just like birds can get like avian flu and stuff like that, alligators can get a lot of diseases too. So we kind of like help do disease surveillance also.
Elizabeth, we had talked on the podcast that you were taking blood samples of some of the alligators for science. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I can. For years, scientists have been studying alligator blood, and particularly for this particular reason, their immune system is so far advanced than human beings, mammals. Alligators have been around, I think, 148 million years. The last major adaptation they had was 6 million years ago. So what you see today is what was walking around 6 million years ago. They have a very unique immunity system, and most of the alligators that you will find in the wild in Louisiana have a leg missing. They have all types of wounds, and they can have when they fight with each other, one will grab the other's leg and they'll death roll them, and they'll literally just pull their arm off. But their circulatory system is made in such a fashion. The easiest way that I can explain it is it's almost like it does like an accordion, and it kind of pulls in on itself, and it's able to cut the blood flow. And then, of course, they're in the swamp, so they're open to all types of bacteria and viruses, and just the most disgusting of the disgusting stuff. But they don't get infections. They continue. This little nub where they had their arm is going to heal up, and it's going to look like a surgeon cut it off, and they're going to go on with their lives and live very happy, healthy lives. So for years they've been studying this, but in particular, one researcher that I've been working with is his name is Barney Bishop, out of the University of oh God, it's not University of George Mason in Virginia. And they have developed a technique. They've identified 48 different peptides that are in an alligator's blood system that human beings do not possess. And they've identified a way to mark 8 of them. And they are using these to develop antibiotics for human beings, and it has to do with MSRA. There's antibiotics for E. coli. There's all kind of things that alligators are immune to. They don't get sepsis. They don't get E. coli. They don't get MSRA. They might get respiratory chlamydia, which is very odd, and they can get West Nile disease, but there's a lot of diseases that they don't get. They're immune to, basically. Their body has built up a great defense against them. So if they've identified these 8 peptides, and what they do with the blood I give them, they were using blood when they did their first paper from a zoo in Fort Lauderdale, and I contacted the guy and I said, I do pull blood samples from wild alligators for disease surveillance, because there's no other mechanism for our state agency to pull blood from wild alligators than someone who either hunts them or a nuisance gator. So I do it, and I just did it for years, like as a courtesy, because it was interesting to me. I even have my own little centrifuge over here I spin them with. And, when I told him I did that, I said, "Would you like me to make duplicate samples?" And he was like, "Sure." So he's using those duplicate samples to check for these 8 particular peptides. And once I really don't know how they do it, but they have a whole other system for developing an antibiotic therapy for humans. And it's a huge Department of Defense fund that they're using, but it's probably going to spin off to others. But this is something that they've been doing for probably 20 years, but it's never gotten to the point where it's been this sophisticated and this advanced. So it's really interesting to see what may come out of this. Another thing, if I may add, we found several alligators that had regrowth on their tails, like their tail had been either cut or gotten an accident or something, and there was regrowth. And I had just read a research paper out of the Journal of Herpetology about this about a month before. And we caught an alligator, and I told my husband, I said, that's a regenerated tail. And he's like, oh, Elizabeth, that's not what that is, And I told one of the biologists, he's like, oh, that's not what it is. That alligator just had his tail burned in the swamp or something, in the marsh. And so I ended up contacting the alligator biologist for the state, and she's like, I think it is. And come to find out, it was. And there's a woman by the name of Cindy Zhu from the University of Arizona who wrote a huge paper on it and, explained it all. And they're actually using those particular items to see if they can regenerate organs for human beings. So it's pretty amazing what you can find from an alligator.
Wow. That is so cool. I remember us talking about this on the podcast a couple of years ago. I think it's been a couple of years. And I'm just as astounded now as I was then. So Elizabeth, I've got a silly question and then I have a serious question. So the silly one is, okay, you ready for this? I've been meaning to ask you this, and I wish I'd asked you before. So when you take the nuisance gators and you're able to relocate them, do you have any kind of like rhyme you'd say to them? Like, see you later. Do you say see you later, alligator?
I do. I can't believe you asked me this. I only have like 3 people who know about this. So if an alligator is 4 feet or smaller, sometimes if they're between 4 or 5, but I don't do this with any of them that are 5 feet and over, because number one, I don't want to stress them out, and number two, it's hard for me to handle them. It's pretty hard to handle 3 feet and over, but I'm pretty stout, and I know how to hold them. But when we take them to release them, we'll have to either put them in a big dog kennel, or I'll just hold them. But if we have to put them like in the boat, like on the floor, we'll put them in those big giant coffee sacks, it's made out of burlap. So, but they still have their mouth taped. So when we're always taking them out somewhere in a boat far away from people. So when we get to the location that we want to let them go, my husband and I, I'll take them out. He'll take them out of the sack, or I'll take them out of the sack, and one of us will hold them, and it's usually me, and the other one will undo the tape on the mouth, and then we'll put them in the water and let them go. Before I do this, I always take them before I untape their mouth, and I just snuggle them real tight against my neck, like they put their little back of their heads against my neck, and I just kind of tell them, it's almost like a little prayer or something. I just wish them luck, and I hope that they do okay. And I don't know. I hope I'm not stressing them out, but I just feel so, like we're giving them a second chance at life. They can go live their best life now, and it makes both of us feel really good that we can do that. So yeah, I do. If they're little ones, I always have them in a blankie. They're always in a blankie, and I just carry them in the boat in a blankie with me, and that's how we do it.
They are so cute when they're little.
They are. I have one I'm looking at right now that's like 12 inches.
Oh, real? It's right by you?
Oh yeah, it's right in the same room with me.
Okay.
It was a nuisance. Somebody found it, and they called my husband, and it didn't look like it was doing so well. So instead of just turning it out and not doing, thinking it's not going to probably make it, we have it in a little pool here in my dining room / office, and he has like a little grating over him. And we come in every day and we try to see how much he's eating and feeding, and then when my husband thinks that he's ready to go, we're going to go let him go. But he still needs to gain a little bit more weight. He was really dehydrated when we got him in.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he's a cutie.
Oh, Yeah, I'll be honest, I creep through your profile sometimes looking for the little baby gator photos that you post sometimes. Um, I don't have, I'm trying to find one. I should have bookmarked some. When you're talking the next time, I'll go through and find one of the blankie photos to put in the
Okay.
nest, for everybody. People are questions probably about gators, but let's move on to the second main topic that you do and is really interesting. Um, and it's hard for me to wrap my head around. And that I know ducks are adorable, but you also deal and ban birds, and you see our better half, the Canadian geese, when they're down there,
I
and
do.
they're not
I,
so vicious.
I think sometimes y'all are just making this up because, we even have migrating Canada geese that we catch and band, and they are not at all as aggressive, as what I see, on social media. However, it's really important that I point out again, if my geese at my house that live here, the one that sits in my lap, if she was hatching eggs, if she was either incubating or if she had little babies, a brood with her, she would not allow me to get anywhere near those babies. Like she would be like Godzilla. So I think that that's probably why, they have such a bad rap, because a lot of people interact with them when they are nesting and when they do have a brood. And geese will mate for life, and they are very ferocious parents. Black belly whistling ducks are exactly the same. We had a pair in our aviary, and it killed like three big ducks because they dared to come near their babies. So we had to take them out. But there are some birds, especially the ones that mate for life, that are they co-parent, and they're ferocious parents, and they will not let anybody near their babies, and they will do whatever they have to do to protect them. And
Yeah.
I will tell you this, if a goose is coming after you, the worst thing you can do is run.
Okay.
I've learned this with my own, and I've learned this with the ones we catch. The best thing you can do is stand your ground, and they'll back off real quick. They get very intimidated. Boy, if they think they got you scared, they're going to go after you like crazy.
Yeah, they'll
We just
chase you
caught
all the
some.
way home.
Oh yeah, we caught some greater white fronted geese Saturday. We actually caught some and put some collars on them, and I have goose hickeys all over my arms we had like two of them that were just not very happy that we caught them. We had some that they just sat in my arms while we measured their wings and everything, and they were just as content as can be. But we had some that just really did a number on us.
Oh, they are, geese and ducks. They're beautiful animals. They're just so cool looking. Um,
They are, and you can learn a lot about the environment and how, kind of like the pulse of how the earth is doing, by how migratory birds behave on with them. I mean, they give us a lot of insight into a lot of other areas of the environment.
I've muted myself. I've put in the nest for people that are curious. There's a video of you snuggling with a Canada goose, up top there. So I think you've tagged Matt from We Rate Dogs, in that
Oh
little video.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was when
So
I was reading her his book.
I know there's a picture of you reading the Thoughts of Dogs book, right? You have a little
Yep.
Canada. Yeah.
I wish I would have videoed that, because as I'm reading it to her, because my husband, I mean, he was about to just roll on the patio ground laughing, but I'm reading it to her and she keeps tilting her head. Like she's literally looking at the pictures like, oh, what's that? And I turn a page and she tilts her head again and look at the pictures. It was so funny.
Oh my goodness. See, and if I showed that to like a regular Canadian, right? I'd be like, "Hey, what do you this?" They'd be like, "Well, that lady's about to be murdered." Like
I know
that's the
the
first thing that
comments
would
I
come
get
to.
are crazy. But this particular pair of geese are, I forget what their scientific name, but they're the largest of Canada geese.
Yeah,
They
they're
usually are
huge.
in the like the upper mountain and Pacific areas, and they're the gigantic kind, and you could tell by the markings on their face. But they were raised in an aviary. We got them from Wisconsin, and they haven't had any children yet. They're still young. They're only like 2.5 years old. So once they start to brood and have a babies, I won't be able to hold her like that when she has babies.
It'll be
She
It'll
will
be
want to.
it'll be a little more dangerous.
Oh yeah, she will be like, Godzilla.
So Elizabeth, I have a question that I would love to hear you chat with everybody in the call about, and that is
Okay.
about your work with banding birds. And
Okay.
and then they're also like you catch them and you catch them for many different reasons, and one of them is banding, but also like there's stuff that you can track them, like you track their migratory path with an
Oh,
app
this
or
is,
something.
yeah. And
Yeah, if you could talk about either of those stories, they're just fascinating.
well, when we do catch birds, we always do band them. Like the black belly whistling ducks that you had had a duck. The picture of me on the advertisement for the spaces
Oh
had
yeah.
me holding the black belly whistling duck, and we've banded. I think my boss has banded close to 70,000 in Louisiana, and there were very few ever banded before. And so we've been able to get like master students and postdocs to do data just with the banding data. And banding data that you get from banding a duck is this: you record the day that you put the band on the duck, and like you record the species, the sex, and where it is that you banded it. And normally you only get 2 points of data when you band waterfowl. You'll have the day you put the band on, and then unfortunately the day the duck was shot. So when the way that banding works, and banding started in 1800s, was whenever it was meant that hunters cover these bands because so many people hunted. So the science of it is, the scientists actually put the band, and then the hunters are the other part, the flip side of the coin, and they're the ones who report back the end data. So the least amount of data you'll have is the day you put the band on and the condition of the bird, where it was, the sex, the age. And then when the bird is taken by a hunter, they will record the same data. They will tell you where they shot it, the condition of the birds, all this other stuff. But when we catch birds with rocket nets, many, many times we'll catch a bird that already has a band on it, and that's called a banding encounter. So that'll give you three data points. Okay. Well, that's basically the only tool that scientists and waterfowl biologists have had since, the 1930s when they did the Migratory Bird Act. That's basically the only tool that they had to get data in order to measure population studies and how many ducks were being taken by hunters, and this and where were the ducks being taken, and so forth and so on. Well, since the 70s they've been using telemetry data, and so telemetry is basically like you got a little cell phone strapped to your back, to your bag, to your back. And it used to be you'd put these little telemetry devices on these birds, whether it's a brown pelican or a duck or whatever, and the same thing with mammals. And then you would have to go back into the field with this big gigantic antenna, and you'd have to download the data via UHF. Well, now things are so much more sophisticated. The telemetry devices that we use are half the size of a matchbox that we have on ducks, and they're what they consider a backpack. So some of them are surgically attached with little tethers to the back. And the most of the ones we have now, we use a certain type of elastic that is UV and marine resistant, and it goes around two loops around their bellies. So it's literally like they're wearing a backpack. And these particular transmitters transmit all the data through GSM. Used to be they had transmitters that you had to get the data transmitted through satellites, but you could pay $2,000 to $3,000 a month just for that data. Now each duck we have has an unlimited data plan with their own little cell phone number, and they just call it. They call in every morning at 7:30 and download their data, and we record a data point every. I think it's every 3 minutes, and we have in the package that we get with our transmitters, they can tell us the duck's bearing, their speed, their elevation. We can get the local weather conditions to use on our data files. Um, we have built-in programs that will tell you if the animal, like you can look at the data on a map and tell if she's brooding, like if she's incubating, or if she has successfully hatched, a brood, and she's taking her little chicks out to get water or whatever. And then once her brood is old enough to fledge off, you can tell that too. We can tell all of this data. Several of our ducks this past summer have had issues with nesting in the prairie pothole regions. And we had one duck that laid up to 6 different nests. She got predated that many times. So what happens with all of this data that we're getting is that we're going to learn exactly what's happening to the migrations of these ducks and the obstacles that they're up against, because it's just been in probably the last 10 years that waterfowl scientists have really started to learn that there's a whole lot more going on with these animals cognitively than what we thought. They don't just arbitrarily get up one day and decide they're going to migrate south. They don't just arbitrarily say, "Oh, I think I'm going to stop here. I'm tired." Our ducks will stop at the same spot year after year after year, going up, towards you, and then coming back down to us when they're migrating, in the fall. And these particular places that they stop have crucial habitat that we have to identify, because they're stopping there for a reason. They're stopping there because they're safe. They're stopping there because they need to eat and they need water. And so in Louisiana, we've had a lot of problems with waterfowl because we have such a tremendous loss of habitat in Louisiana for various reasons. But we do not nearly have the duck population that we did when I was a young girl. And it's getting harder and harder to duck hunt around here because we have so fewer ducks. And so it's been a huge uprising in the duck hunting community in Louisiana for people, want to know what's going on, what's happening. And if you want to know what's happening, I can tell you exactly what's happening, because we have so many of these waterfowls that are outfitted with these telemetry devices, and we can follow them. We have postdocs that are working now on the greater white-fronted geese. We call them here in Louisiana. They have more of those in their population now than ever. However, we have very few that come to Louisiana. There's like a shift in their migration, and people want to know why. They want to know what's going on. So this is our 8th year of putting these collars on white-fronted geese. And so normally when you're doing a telemetry study, it's usually it's usually a PhD student or a master's student, and they usually get at the maximum amount 2 years of data. We have 8 years of data. We have a couple of geese that are still transmitting data that they had their collars put on in 2015 and 2016. So we will not only be able to give a lot of data, we will also be able to tell, okay, if we had a really severe drought in this particular winter, how did it affect their nesting in the summer? So we'll be able to learn a lot of information, but we have 2 postdocs right now working on that. So the same thing started happening with waterfowl, mallard ducks, pintail ducks. So we went ahead, and most of the transmitters that we put on, we had to raise money to get it. Like the state didn't pay for a lot of this because it's expensive. They're like $1,200 a piece, the transmitters, but they last 3 to 5 years. Some of them last beyond 5 years. And if they go offline, let's say they can't reach a cell tower, they can hold up to a year's worth of data in their little hard drive. So it's pretty amazing. And if we happen to have a duck or a goose that dies or is predated, we will find the transmitter and recover it, and then we will redeploy it on another. That's one of my specialties, is hunting for transmitters. I love doing that. So we have 1 master students now working on some blue-winged teal data that we have, and then we partnered with Texas A&M. They're working on some pintail data, but we're still deploying pintail transmitters this year, and we're also deploying, I think we're on our 3rd year of mallard transmitters. So, and we've also partnered with other states that have found out what we're doing, and so we've gotten other wildlife and fisheries, people from other states that have joined in so that we can pool all of this data together. So that's basically what we do with the telemetry.
That's so amazing. Just to kind of like remind everybody, we have some new people that have joined. My name's Jason Zakowski. I'm the dog dad of Bunsen and Beaker. We're speaking with Elizabeth Bourgeois, who's a forensic accountant, but does some amazing work as a citizen scientist with ducks, geese, and gators. Elizabeth, I don't know if you can see in the nest. I will delete it because I posted it on like one of your pictures. I'm sorry. Is that the telemetry? Is that the telemetry? Is that the data? So that's like the the flight path of the geese, right?
Right. That's our greater white-fronted geese, and that is actually their migration path that they just took to come south. like a few
Wow.
weeks ago.
So what was that yellow geese's
That
problem?
yellow guy.
What did he do? He like went out into the Gulf of Mexico and he's like, wait a
We do
sec, I
not
went the wrong
know, but
way. What is he
this has
doing?
happened. This has happened several times where they'll stop off. Like a lot of times when they migrate south, not so much when they're going north, but when they're coming south, a lot of them will just fly. Like they'll leave. They nest in the lower Arctic. So I don't know really what the names of that is, but you'll be familiar with it. But it's like where Inuit, the Inuit communities and stuff. And
Oh,
that's
oh
where
yeah,
they're
that's way north of us. Yeah,
yeah,
that's way
that's where
north.
they'll nest. And then they'll come to Saskatchewan and those particular places in order to what they call pre-stage. And pre-stage means for 2 weeks, all you do is eat. And they fatten
Hmm.
up for the trip, then they'll migrate south. And usually when they're migrating south, most of them will fly straight in. But as you can see, this past year, a lot of them flew straight in, like to, north of Arkansas and around that area. And then
Mm.
a lot of them flew into Louisiana. But that yellow one, we're not really sure what happened with him, but we know where he came to in Louisiana because that's a provide that they have. But then we don't know why he went out into the Gulf. But that has happened almost every year. We have one or two that do this. And I want to say this is pretty interesting. We have 5 particular white front geese, and I think this is probably their 3rd year, maybe, but they're siblings. And 3, they will get together and pre-stage in Saskatchewan, and they will fly down to Louisiana together, and they will do their little thing, and they'll go here and do there, and they won't stay together while they're in Louisiana, but they'll do their own thing. They might stay together sometime. When they're ready to go back up north, they all meet up again, and they all fly back up again. 3 of them will go like towards the western part of the Inuit territory and nest there, and then the 2 of them will go more to the eastern part, like below, and nest
Oh,
over. But it's
wow, way out to Quebec, hey?
yeah,
Wow.
there's when we catch them, whenever we catch, we're probably going to catch a good amount this weekend. When we catch a large amount, like we always hold the birds and then we let them go all at the same time, because we may have one goose that's in box 3 that's actually a family member of another goose that's in box 8. And so we let them all go at the same time. And I always video them, and you can literally watch them as they fly away, getting into their groups and then
Aw,
flying
that's
off as a
so
family
cool.
unit.
Aw.
Yeah, we had
Oh.
in Arkansas one year we've had a family unit. We knew it was a family unit, but we weren't exactly sure. But we banded all of them, and like the next, I don't know, 2 weekends after that, some hunter, they saw like 4, speckle bellied geese flying over, and they all had bands, and one of them had a collar on. So they didn't shoot the one with the collar, but they shot the ones with the bands. And they basically just killed all of her family. And that poor goose like flew around for 2 weeks looking for her family. Like broke my heart, and I guess hunters don't, that when I'm hunting, I'm not going to shoot a goose. Like I used to before I did this, but I'm not anymore because I'm so worried I'm going to shoot one with a telemetry device. But you don't really think about it, that they have that much cognition, and they have, relations like that, and that's how they
Hmm.
rely on each other. But it's very interesting.
So they stop off in Saskatchewan to fatten up.
Yep. They
Um,
call that
I wonder if
pre-stage.
yeah, they're probably, I was say like probably they're eating all the pierogies, and then the ones in Quebec get the poutine. So
Oh,
no, I'm just
man, I
kidding.
don't know what
I'm
they're
just
eating,
kidding.
but they will up around that area. They will pre-stage, and some of them will go to other areas in the prairie pothole regions. But for the most part, there a lot of them are around there. But
This
it's
has
just
been
amazing.
It's so fascinating. I could listen to you talk about this for hours, Elizabeth. You're such a great storyteller, and you're so knowledgeable. I'm just so impressed.
Well, thank you. We
Elizabeth, are you?
also do. We also, with our blue-winged teal, we do flu surveillance, and
Oh,
so
right, yeah.
that's part of I forget what it's called, Jason, you have to forgive me, but there's like a whole entire worldwide system that does a bird flu surveillance. They I don't know if I tell you, but there was a show on Netflix called Pandemic. It was a series. It was right before the
Oh yes,
pandemic came out. Yeah, we
yeah,
were
that
in
was a little on the
episode.
nose, hey.
Yeah, we were in episode 3. They showed us catching blue-winged teal and how we, take sampling from them, because blue-winged teal, those little tiny birds, are the first to migrate out and then the last to migrate in, and they have such a huge range of migration. Like, we have some with telemetry. These little girls will, they'll nest up in the prairie pothole region. They'll come down through Florida, go to the Keys, spend 3 or 4 months in Honduras or Colombia, and then come back up through Louisiana, and then go back up, up to your place. So they have a huge range, but they're one of the primary carriers of diseases because they go to so many different places and they have such a huge migration range. So we do a lot of disease surveillance on them because they're one of the biggest carriers of all these types of diseases.
Nobody's stopping them to, quarantine and isolate as they pass through country.
And very few people actually even stop to think about how viruses move around the earth, and that birds play a humongous role in it.
Huge role, yeah. Wow. Okay, so Elizabeth, are you all right taking some questions from the crowd?
Absolutely.
So Tracy, when you're ready, go ahead.
Hi, I may have missed this, but is it a predated duck, you said?
Pre-staging?
No, predated. Like predator.
Predated, like a
predated.
duck that a predator has gotten a hold of, right?
Oh, okay.
Like, a lot of the ducks will lay their nest in the prairie pothole regions, and there's a lot of like foxes and things like that, and they'll eat their eggs. And so when that happens, the duck will have to lay a new clutch.
Okay, so it's like predator, not like pre.
Right,
okay,
right.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't know that term either until I talked to Science with Tyus, thinking about predation.
Oh yeah, I love Tyus. I love him.
Tyus is awesome. He's talking about predation of big cats, and I was like, "What are you? I don't know what you're talking about." So I had to cut that out of the podcast because I sounded like a kind of a silly guy. Okay, over to Paula and then David.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, I am so envious of you petting that goose and telling it a story, because I'm sorry, Jason, but I love Cobra chickens and Canada geese. Because we always had a lot in our backyard, and I used to take photographs of the parents with their little babies, and I used to do a lot of observation, just being very quiet. So I kind of have a real genuine love for them.
Oh, you're my kind of person.
Oh,
same. I did all of that when I was growing up.
Oh my gosh, I lived across from a golf course, and of course they are always in the water. So, but I would just, after the sun was going down, but I would take photographs and photographs of these geese and just watching them go from little fluff balls to like gankly looking teenagers. But anyway, my question is, when you have all these flight patterns of these geese, if I'm correct, isn't it like the eldest that takes the whole group up north, and do you see that data change? Is it always that specific goose that takes the lead, or is it vary?
I will. Man, you know a lot. You know more than most of the hunters I've met. Usually they will fly down in family groups, and they will fly up in family groups, and they do this for the first 2 to 3 years, so that the babies will learn the route. At least that's what we think. So the babies will learn the route, because there's several theories about how they choose their route. Do they use like landmarks? Or they, some scientists believe, oh no, they just decide they're going to fly one direction and that's just the way they go. Some people think they use landmarks. There is some research that's been done on waterfowl, especially certain types of ducks, that they actually have the capability in their eyes to actually see the magnetic field. They used to think that waterfowl had like some type of iron chemical makeup in their beak that they use, basically like a small compass. And I think that's been debunked, but they actually can see the magnetic field to see where to go. They also can feel barometric pressure and weather coming on. So we will see a shift in our our ducks and our geese and not know why, and then realize that there's a front that, a year or so later, we realize there's a front coming. So to answer your question, yes, the older ones, particularly the mother and the father, will migrate with their young ones with them, and it won't be just for the first year. Like I said, even if they have babies like for 3 years in a row, they could have like, the 3-year-olds, the 2-year-olds, and the new babies with them. And so that's a very common thing that these geese do to migrate.
Oh, that's really interesting because
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was like a senior grandfather that always took the lead, or I didn't know it was the parents with generations. That's fascinating.
Yeah, the parents are. For these parents mate for life, and they're ferocious, and they take their seriously. They definitely understood the assignment. And
very good, Elizabeth.
They do, and I mean it's sad because when one of them gets killed or dies, they will eventually find a new mate. But they are just excellent at raising their young, and of course the children will pattern that behavior off of them.
Well, that's really cool. Well, thank you very much. And I was going to ask one more quick question, if I may, about alligators and crocodiles. What are the difference?
Alligators and crocodiles, there's not a lot genetically. Well, there's speaking, I guess, from temperament, crocodiles can get a lot longer than alligators. They can get really long, like 20 feet and longer. Their snout is made a little different. Alligators are more like a U-shaped end, and crocodiles are more like a V-shaped. And crocodiles are much more aggressive than alligators. An alligator is what you would call they hunt by stealth. Their whole life they live by stealth. So they are able to pretend that they're nothing more than a log. And when they have an opportunity to eat something, they will grab it real quick. They can go through very large, very quick burst of energy, but only for about 30 seconds because their heart isn't big enough to pump enough oxygen. But that's basically the differences. It's like crocodiles are like alligators on steroids.
I love it.
Okay, thank you very much. I love it too. That was just fascinating. I could listen for another hour, I swear.
Well, I'm going to try to get some more goose content to put on my my Twitter just for you. Just for you.
You're so sweet. Thank you, Elizabeth. Take care.
All right.
Isn't Elizabeth such a great speaker? Man, I could listen to her for hours. You're right, Paula. David, over to you, and then I'm going to read a couple DM, and then to Liz, and then actually Chris wanted to ask a question to Elizabeth in a second, but we'll go to David first.
Okay. It's an alligator question. I know alligators, they live in the fresh water and they don't really like salt water too much, but I've seen a bunch of news clips and disturbing frequency lately, maybe not lately, but last summer and before, of them showing up on the beach in the surf kind of thing. And I was wondering,
absolutely,
how does that happen and why? And hopefully it's not increasing because I don't want any part of that.
Well, I don't blame you. We actually, my husband and I will go to an island that's 10 miles off of the coast of Louisiana. It's a complete refuge, but people will go there to crab. They have like these big weirs and dams, and people go there to fish for crabs. And a lot of times we have to go get gators there because they get accustomed to the people feeding them like chicken and stuff. And so they become, very accustomed to people, and it poses a huge danger. But that they're in salt water. I mean, a lot of it is brackish, but then there's fresh water on the island, but they'll swim out, and they're out in the bay, 10 miles off the coast. You're going to have some salt. And so that's not unusual. They learn to tolerate a lot of the salt density. I mean, we hunt alligators a lot off of the coast, and we'll find them. It's very common that they're in those environments. They can tolerate it very easily. It's not like a dolphin that like if a dolphin or something like that comes out of salt water into fresh water, immediately it's going to have an effect on its skin, and it's going to start causing lesions. But alligators are because they have such hard skin and everything else, and they can tolerate that salt water very easily. They can also I'm not able to explain to you now because I'm not up on it, but I do remember reading a paper how they are able to through their metabolization of salt, regulate the salt content within their body.
Okay.
So that's another mechanism they have. But if they, a lot of the reasons why they get in these situations is usually, especially in Louisiana, we'll have a lot of rain. And when there's a lot of rain and the water levels go up, they get dispersed in places that they aren't supposed to be in. And so they just are out looking for the closest, water they can find. Unfortunately, that they end up, meeting people in the process.
Oh, okay.
But normally they are not. One thing I will tell you this, they do not like people. They do not want to be around people. They don't want to have anything to do with us unless someone feeds them. And that's the biggest problem we have in this state with regards to human and alligator interaction. If you feed an alligator once, they will forever associate a human being with food. And people feed them because they think it's funny, but basically it's a death sentence to that alligator, because that alligator is going to continue to look for people to get food, and they will start, growling at you and hissing, and they will eventually scare people, and then they call someone like us that has to go get them. And if they call us and there's a big 10-foot alligator and it's been that habituated, there is no place we can take them that they'll be safe and away from people. They will seek out people. We can take them way into the Chaffalaya Basin. They will eventually find people and try to get food from them. So the department itself, has a policy of, if they're a certain size and depending on how aggressive they are to people, that we will have to euthanize them. And that is really unfortunate, because that breaks my heart, because it's not their fault,
Yeah, I've seen it myself. Last summer I went. I live in Tampa area, but I went up to North Florida to do some kayaking on the Chassahowitzka, which is a spring-fed river. And it's the kind of place where you'd expect a lot of gators, and they're there. But it's so popular to kayak there, especially on the weekends, that all these people kayaking, and they're nowhere to be found because we're scaring away what they want to eat.
Absolutely. And they're very, very good at hiding. I mean, there's been plenty of times where I might be like, part of what I do at waterfowl is I have to hide in ditches and bayous with the detonator, like to shoot the rocket nets off. And, this hardwired. So I have this little boom box that I've got to set the charge off with. And I've walked in these canals and accidentally walked on a gator. It might be 40 degrees outside and they're not going to move. But, every now and then I'll get a tail that'll hit me. So there's a lot of times where gators are around and we just don't know it, because they're so good at blending into the environment. There's no way we could detect them. But they really don't like to be around people. But like I said, if you start to feed them, they are going to become very aggressive. And it doesn't take long for that behavior, for them to be conditioned like that. And that's the biggest problem we have here in Louisiana. People just think it's funny to feed them and that it's entertaining, but it causes a lot of problems.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's like in Canada, Elizabeth, with bears. There's
Exactly.
There's signs everywhere.
Same thing.
A fed bear is a dead bear, and that's
exactly right.
It's absolutely, it's heartbreaking, because they're just. I mean, we love bears just as much as you love alligators, because you're around them and they're majestic, amazing creatures, and it's very heartbreaking to know that that's what happens to some bears. They become nuisance bears, and that's the end of their life. They've associated people with food,
because you can't unlearn. You can't undo that.
No. Well, especially because it's an easy source of food too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to read a couple of the DM questions, and then we'll get through a couple more speakers. Elizabeth, just to respect your time, are you able to stay past 8, judging by the amount?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, or whatever time that is for you. You are. It's 9 for you right now, just about 9.
Yeah, I'm good.
You're okay for a bit. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I still have some more computer work to do, and I'm gonna be up and out of here at 3 a.m. So.
Okay. All right. We'll try not to keep you too long, but it's going to be more than the hour just to get through the questions.
That's great. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So from DM, there's a serious question and a maybe more lighthearted question. Nancy was asking, do you tag the alligator after you catch them to identify if they're repeat offenders?
No, but that's a good question. Some of the alligators, a lot of people don't realize this. So when alligators were basically endangered, and the reason they became endangered is because trappers who made money off of selling, pelts, pretty much killed them all because they didn't want them eating all their their stuff they were trapping. And this was like, late 1800s, like early 1900s. And so when our department, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, they developed a program to try to, save the alligator. One of the ways they did it is by having alligator farms. And so what we do, and the way it works now, I fly in a helicopter and I look for alligator nest, and I will punch them the GPS coordinate in, and then my husband and I will go back in an airboat, because it's usually around, in the marsh area that you find them with helicopters. And in this nest, let's say there's 50 eggs. We'll pick all the 50 eggs, and you have to be very careful the way you handle them. And then we give them to the farmer, and the farmer will incubate them, and you can incubate them, to be all male or all female, and they prefer to have them all male so that they grow faster. And then after a year, the alligator program dictates that you have to put back into that same GPS location where you took those eggs. You have to bring back what the normal survival rate of that clutch would be. So if it's 10%, 12%, whatever it is, we have to take, and they have to be at least 4 feet long, because once they're 4 feet long, they don't, they're not going to be predated by anything other than another alligator. And so this is what you call return alligators. So in order not to upset the balance of the alligator population due to alligator farming, you have to put back the normal survival rate, okay? And so we will do that. We'll bring these alligators out there and release them. And all of those alligators are tagged. They have a web tag on their back feet, and it has their serial number. And then they have on their tails, you know how they have like these notches, like they have double rows of notches, but then on their tails they have just those single notches, like they'll call them scoots. They will every year take out a notch or two, and it'll be in a certain pattern so that you can identify what year that alligator was released based on the notch pattern. Because a lot of times the web tags that are in their legs, after 3 or 4 years, they'll come loose. They'll scrape them off, or they'll come off. And so there are a lot of alligators that we do catch either in the hunting season or through the nuisance hunting that have been released by farms. And we are able to tell, we have to report those in, and they're able to tell you exactly, when they were released and where they were released. And so that does it's kind of similar to banding data for waterfowl, but that gives them some data that they can look at to see how these gators are moving around. I will tell you though, so we don't tag them when we release them. Once they're a nuisance, we just let them go and hope they live their best life and never see another human again. But we do raise alligator snapping turtles. Those are actually listed to be endangered. I hope that goes through. And we do tag those. They have to be like 4 years old before you can let them go. But we do put tags on those that are coming from the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, so that if anybody ever catches one, that they can, give that data, call in and give that data also. So that was a really good question. I really wish we could tag the ones that we relocate, but as of right now, it's not feasible. There's not enough money to do it.
And just a follow-up question to that direct message, is that you take the notches out so you can see the alligator from far away? You don't have to get too close and read their tag? Like, is that one of the ideas?
That's one of the ideas. Like, if you just see an alligator basking in the sun, you can tell by his tail what year he was released.
Gotcha, yeah. I've seen that when we took the kids, our students, to the Marine Biology Center on Vancouver Island. They did something similar to that with seals. I think they tranked a few of them and then shaved some numbers on them so you could see
Really?
Yeah, they're like number 76. It's number 76. The seal was basking.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because I guess it takes forever for their fur to grow back.
Right.
And the
numbers. It's kind of like putting tarsal bands on Canada geese. Those big bands that have like three numbers or 3 letters.
Yeah.
That's so you can see, that's considered another encounter for banding data, but you didn't have to catch it. You can just see it. And we do that with on the brown pelicans when we go on the Berry Islands. That's one of the things we do is we look for those so we can, keep track of where they are and what they're doing.
Cool. Okay, so Elizabeth, this is the lighthearted question. It's from Christy. She was wondering about have you ever seen the Swamp People show, and what do you think of it?
I have seen the Swamp People show, and I think the Swamp People show is very good for entertainment value. and it did a lot of good to help the economics of the alligator industry in Louisiana. However, it is completely and absolutely false.
Okay.
That is not what real alligator hunting is like at all.
Mm.
Our alligators, like when we're hunting alligators and we come to a line that's down, I will very gently pull up on the line, and as long as the alligator's head does not break the surface of the water, that alligator still thinks that he's hidden and he's in stealth mode. And so if we dispatch him in that particular way, there's no fight, there's no nothing. He just basically, he's out, he's done.
It doesn't make good TV.
It does not. And what's really sad, and I should probably, somebody's going to probably get really mad at me for saying this, but I have to. When they show those alligators fighting and all that splashing and they're pulling on that line, there's a huge shark hook in that alligator's stomach that is ripping all the insides of that alligator up.
Not
and
very
to me,
humane.
no, it's not humane. Some people say, oh, well, it's cold-blooded. It doesn't feel pain. I don't know, guys. I don't know about that. But my husband and I, it might be difficult for some people to understand because we do hunt alligators, but we also have great reverence for them, and we do not like to see any type of animal suffer. Like we make some very good shots, and it's over, it's done, there's nothing, and we don't ever do that stuff. There are times when maybe it might get hung up on underwater on a branch or something, and it might take some effort, but we don't ever do that. And so many people have come alligator hunting with us, and we don't guide. We don't do that because I don't have enough patience to put up with that. But friends of ours or landowners, or we've had a lot of journalists and scientists that come with us, and they just are amazed. They're like, my God, no offense, but this is the most boring thing I've ever done. I'm like, I know, I told you. It's not at all like it is on TV, but they have to do that for dramatic purposes,
Yeah. I've never seen the show. I've seen the ads for the show. I've never actually watched the show, but I do
can't
know
watch
about
it because it makes me so, I just get so anxious watching that. I'm like, oh no, stop doing that, But, who am I? I can't, dictate what TV shows they make, and, I can just say what I feel, but it does make me uncomfortable to watch it.
Right. Well, there was a very popular show that was filmed in Eastern Canada called Trailer Park Boys, and definitely that is not indicative of the trailer park people of Canada. So people are. Oh, I see some people laughing. They've seen that show before. So
it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I'm going to add this real quick, but a lot of people don't realize this about Louisiana. But Louisiana, like in the early 1900s, the Cajun people, the French people, were considered lower than slaves, like the most uneducated, wild animal people. We were, something that you couldn't do anything with because they didn't speak English. It was very difficult to get industry to come into the state, for the Port of Orleans and all this other stuff. So our governor in 1922 signed an edict that all children in school could no longer speak French. They had to speak English. And my father was 13 before he learned to speak English. And so they did everything that they could to kind of get rid of it. Was almost it's not nearly to the scope, but very small compared to what they did to the indigenous people, in Canada and stuff.
Yeah.
But they tried really hard to just kill that part of the culture and make sure everybody could speak English. And they want to get rid of, these Cajun people. They want to get rid of all of that. And so they spent years wiping that out. And, in the 1970s, they did a lot of programs to try to bring some of that back because they realized, we effectively killed out an entire culture here. And so they did a lot of stuff to bring it back and teach people French and stuff. And unfortunately, you can't really get back that kind of stuff. But I tell people all the time, it took us 50-something years to get back, to where we were. And then the Swamp People show comes out. And in a matter of overnight, we're back to the way we were in 1922.
Oh, so like you said, there was some good that came out of it. It's just perhaps the dramatic stuff was not so great. So that's that's good to have. That's really good to have that perspective. I would not have known that at all if Christy didn't ask that question. Okay, so we'll go to actually Chris wanted to ask a question, then we'll go to Liz, then Jennifer, then Miss Marvel, and then we'll see if there's any more questions after that. But go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your knowledge about gators and about birds. For me, I'm very curious if you are familiar with the plight of the whooping crane, and if in your career you have done any work with whooping cranes or banded the whooping cranes. I became familiar with the endangered bird when early on in my teaching career. I taught a story about the prairies, and the great white bird was in it. And then I watched a film by the National Film Board and just fell in love with the bird, like being like the tallest crane, the tallest bird in North America, and their courtship. And they're kind of you root for the whooping crane, but then they don't really help themselves either with their survivability rate. So have you done any work with whooping cranes?
I actually I haven't personally, but my boss is actually now over the whooping crane program in Louisiana. He's now over all the research of in Louisiana, and part of that is it's called White Lake Research Center in Louisiana, and that's where we have our whooping cranes. And so I get to he sends me pictures all the time, of when they dress up in their big whooping crane suits and go out there, and they do a lot of telemetry on almost every one of them has a telemetry transmitter, but they have a unique ones that they actually fit on the bottom of their legs, because they're so tall, and they have like little antennas on their legs, so they don't have a backpack. They have a different type of transmitter, so they're able to track them. But unfortunately, the ones that we have here in Louisiana, their survivability and to actually have a complete brood and chicks that actually live past 1 year is not very, very good at all. And I think a lot of it has to do with there's not a huge gene pool to pick from. We had birds that have come in from other places, and we just got some new ones in not long ago. But I don't know enough about cranes to give you a good educated opinion, but they don't seem to be the best of parents. And I don't know if it's, because right now they're in an environment where they're in a refuge where nobody can mess with them. Like they won't even fly over them to do bird counts, if they're nesting. Like I had a transmitter that was down on an area where they were nesting, and we couldn't even go look for it. Like they're like, no, you're not going anywhere near that. So they make a huge effort to try to help them all they can. But we've had several that have actually flown into power lines and been electrocuted. And it's like, I don't understand how that's happening. Like other birds know not to fly into power lines. So there's some stuff going on, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. And I don't even know if they know what it is. I don't know if it's a genetic issue that's why, the eggs aren't able to, hatch. I don't know if the embryos have some deformities. I don't know if it's a gene pool thing, but for some reason they haven't been that viable. And they're going to be finding out, a lot of stuff in the next 2 years about them, because my boss is like really determined to find out what's going on. But they really have a lot of challenges.
Yeah, they sure do. Like even if they have 2 eggs in their nest, they'll just walk around and then step on their egg, and you think,
I
what?
know.
Why would you do that?
I know, and it kind of makes me think that, but maybe this is because their gene pool is so small and it's affecting their behavior. I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. But another thing, Chris, that's so ridiculously pathetic, people shoot them.
Yep.
And
they do.
Like, I can't wrap my head around what would make you, one, you were putting collars on geese and somebody saw one in a field on Facebook, and the next day it went offline, and we found the bird with a .22 bullet in it and no collar, and apparently destroyed the collar. And, this is just the kind of stuff that I'll never wrap my head around, why people do stuff like that. But there's been a lot of the whooping cranes that have been shot, and people have been prosecuted. And I mean, really prosecuted. But, that old saying, you can't fix stupid. And we seem to have a good market of it around here.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like they have a long haul. They have to go all the way from Northwest Base to your location, and I just think they're amazing. But then also that they have a lot of challenges. I
They
Hmm.
do
do.
have an Yeah, I do have another question. You said you have a little gator that's a male. Now we have turtles here at the house, and we can't tell if they're a male or female until they reach a certain size. So how do you know you have a little male?
You have to do what they call a vent check. You have to actually like kind of open it up and look inside. And depending on how big the gator is, sometimes you have to like stick your finger in there. It's
Oh,
kind of like checking the sex on a big goose. You got to like get in there and look.
well, that's very enlightening. Thank you.
I know. I'm sorry. Sorry to be
Is
so
that?
blunt.
Are you going to be doing that to Carl and or Sagan, Chris?
Not with a
Absolutely not.
turtle. Yeah, turtles, usually you can tell by the width of the tail, the shape of the tail, whether
Yeah,
it's a male or female. But you can't do it when they're that little.
no.
But bigger you can do it. But yeah, I'm never sexed a turtle, so I don't know if I can help you with that. But I know like
No.
our big alligator snapping turtles and common snappers, you can tell by the shape of their tail if it's a male or female. But that's when it's, an adult.
Yeah, we know that Carl and or Sagan are males. So,
Well,
Yeah, because they try to kill each other.
well, that's true.
oh,
They're
Chris, you know
little.
what else we also have, and I just saw these day before yesterday. I was driving to one of our sites and I passed a big cow pasture, and there were probably about 30 or 40 of those the other cranes. They're not whooping cranes. They're
The sandhill cranes.
yes. Oh my God. Yes.
They are more
Beautiful.
successful. They're
Yeah.
beautiful, more successful than the whoopers. But I just have a special spot in my heart for those
Well,
whoopers.
I'm going to get you some pictures of the whooping cranes and post them for you.
Okay, thank you. That would be amazing.
I will. And I'll see if I can find out some of the answers to those questions when I talk to my boss tomorrow.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
They're just tall and klutzy like me. That's probably it. But I've never stepped on my kids and taken them out. So,
Yeah, me either. Wow.
over to Liz and then to Jennifer.
Hello.
Hey.
So, great name, by the way. So I have a couple quick questions. You said you and your husband do gator hunting. Now, I'm in Northern Virginia. We don't have gators, and we have deer. And up here, you hunt deer because if you don't, they will starve to death, and you eat them. So, do people eat gators?
Oh God, Liz, do they?
What does it taste like?
Okay, so it has the texture of chicken, but it's more of it's a white meat, but it has more of a texture of chicken, but it's just an odd, I don't know. And the only alligator meat that I've eaten, unfortunately, was alligator that one of my brothers had caught when I was much younger. And if you don't clean it exactly right and you have some of the fat on there, you ever heard of alligator oil, like snake oil salesmen,
Mm-hmm.
it has the most excruciating and pungent smell that you will never get. And so if you eat a bad batch that wasn't cleaned appropriately, you will never eat it again. And that's exactly what happened to me. But there's a huge market for alligator meat, and that came from the show, the Swamp People. And one of the processors that cleans our alligators, his biggest one of his biggest clients was like Carnival Cruise Line, because it's such a novelty to eat alligator meat, and it is actually very healthy for you. It's actually very good. And so this is all like farm raised alligators meat, that people are eating, and they apparently love it. And a lot of people overseas, like alligator meat too. So it's actually pretty good, and I have eaten it. But what has happened to me though, Liz, and I don't want to get too graphic, but when we are alligator hunting and we have to, dispatch these alligators and they're coming into the boat, they will vomit, because they have no control anymore. And the stuff that comes out of their stomach, alligators have one of the highest concentrations of acid in their stomach than any other living organism. Like, they can eat a number 3 shark hook that's made out of stainless steel. In 6 weeks, that hook is gone in their belly.
Wow.
So if you get any of the stomach contents on you, just on your hand's going to immediately start burning really badly. And a lot of times I'll pull these big gators in and they will basically vomit on me. And I have to, the smell is, I can't even disclose, I can't even imagine how to describe it to you, but it's something you'll never forget. But just because of that experience, I don't want anything to do with an alligator. It's kind of like if you ever had a really bad hangover and you never want to drink that alcohol again for the rest of your life. Same kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm like, no, I don't need to eat that. But it is considered a novelty and a delicacy, and people love it. I mean, around here, they pay $6 to $9 a pound for it. Yeah. So they really like it. And you want to hear something really strange? The rest of the alligator carcass that's not used is sold to Purina, and Purina makes alligator chow with it.
What?
Yeah, baby.
For cats?
No, baby. For alligators.
They feed alligators to alligators?
Yeah, they make a pellet. It looks like dog food, but that's what they feed the alligators in the farms, because they feed them a very high protein concentration of food so that they will grow real fast. Because in a farm, the alligator will go from a hatchling to a 4-foot gator in 1 year.
There's a problem. There's a problem in Canada with that, with Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease in cows, right? That's where mad cow disease came from.
Right. That has a lot to do. Yeah. So, and if they want to decrease the rate of growth of their inventory, they'll just feed them a lower protein content food. So, but yeah, they don't waste any of it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. They, and then a lot of like the heads and the feet and all that go to like, consumer, they like taxidermy or whatever, and they use that, sell for, trinkets and novelties.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty interesting.
That is cool. And then I just have one other quick question. I know that the plural of anecdote is not data, but I think that many of us in this group would agree the Canadian geese, aka cobra chickens, are the devil and they're very evil. But before, you said they were pretty chill. So where do you think that kind of stereotype came from, other than one has attacked my car before?
I think a lot of you see, Canada geese their migration has changed in the last 20, 30 years tremendously. They used to south, and very seldom do we ever have Canada geese that come this far south anymore. They will stop like in Illinois and in all those areas, and so they become entrenched in a suburban environment that they previously weren't in, and because they're nesting and having babies, they're doing everything they can to protect their babies. And I'm telling you, I have seen them tear horses up. I mean, like, I'm telling like
I've seen them chase herds of cows.
Like they are vicious, but they will do everything they have to do to protect their young. And the fact that this is, become such a common thing is that because they interact so much with people before, and 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't that much interaction. But now, I mean, I've seen pictures of them like taking over whole subdivisions and stuff like that, where they're just such a pest, and people don't know what to do with them. And, that's a problem. That's a problem.
Aren't they a protected species too? Like, because they'll stand on our road. It's like, well, I hate birds anyway. Sorry. It's like, can you run them over? But apparently, you get in a lot of trouble if you.
No, you can't run them over. That's like an alligator. Oh man, don't kill an alligator. If you do, don't tell anybody, because you'd be better off kidnapping a kindergartner than to kill an alligator. I mean, like, it's people don't realize. Yeah, but any type of migratory bird, you don't want to kill it because you don't know what's going to happen.
Good to know.
They're protected up here. You can't shoot. You cannot kill Canada
Don't
geese.
they have a season? Doesn't Canada have a season
for them? I don't know. Maybe.
I thought they had a spring season or something.
I'll have to fact check myself. Maybe that's true.
But I mean, there's just their population is huge, and what's happening is they're just getting in urban environments, and
there are more contacts with people, and when you have more contacts with people who have cell phones that can take video, then there's just more viral content of people getting taken out by these Canada geese.
It's basically the same thing we have over here with alligators. Like, people, it's an alligator, and they walk up to it, and then the moment the alligator does something, God, look at what it did. But it's like, you just leave it alone, it'll be all right. But they'll be out. I mean, Liz, there's a one hospital here that has a bayou in the back of it, and 3 or 4 times a year, my husband has to go to the ER. Like ambulances are trying to get into the ER, and there's like a 9-foot alligator standing right there, and it is not going to move. It does not give a damn. Tough. It's not moving, and like we literally have to go lasso it and wrangle it out of there. So same thing.
Oh man.
Awesome. Well, thank you for entertaining my question.
You're welcome.
Great questions, Liz. Okay, over to Jennifer and then to Miss Marvel. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I am having a hard time picking segues. So I am in New York, and in New York, we do have a Canada goose season, both migratory and resident. They're two different seasons. So I have had Canada goose. I married into a family from St. Mary's Parish in Louisiana. So I also had a gator.
I am like right next to St. Mary Parish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my husband grew up in Franklin. Maybe he knows you. I don't know.
I know a lot of people from Franklin. Yep.
But at any rate, he took me to Avery Island and that bird sanctuary. And not too far from where I live is Montezuma, which is a national wildlife sanctuary here in New York, where there's lots of migratory birds. And what surprised me when I looked at your migratory map was, and I think it's because of the type of bird, that it wasn't coming up through this area.
That is because we are only studying birds in the Mississippi Flyway. You're going to be in the Atlantic Flyway.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm going to find out. There's guys that are studying them in the Atlantic Flyway, and I can find out who they are, and we'll make sure and post it. So that
cool. I was just curious.
Check it out.
There's this Louisiana, New York connection I have. But what I was really curious about is, can you comment on the sort of shrinking of wetlands and delta areas and their impact on both birds and gators?
Absolutely. So in Louisiana, I mean, we've lost a tremendous amount of just hard ground land, both from subsidence, from it just, sinking, and then from coastal erosion. And what has happened is, I think a lot of the waterfowl have already adapted their flight plans, their migration loops to show that. I mean, a lot of the birds are not coming as far down south as they used to. They're migrating to Arkansas instead of coming to Louisiana. A lot of them will fly to the coast, but then like a day or two later, they're going up to Arkansas because there's better habitat. One of the things that's happening in Louisiana that's a lot of people aren't aware of is rice fields. So when you farm rice fields, that's perfect habitat for waterfowl. But in Louisiana, since 2010, we have less than half of the rice field acreage now than we did in 2010. Okay, that's 12 years ago, 11 years ago. Of the rice fields that we do have left in Louisiana, we now have what they call hybrid rice farming, and basically it's like Roundup ready. Instead of like when instead of the old way of you plant your rice and then you might have some other vegetation growing with it, like springle top or whatever, other secondary plants are growing that ducks, will eat, that ducks love to eat. Now, a lot of the farmers use this new variety of rice and it's Roundup ready. And so you plant it and you spray Roundup and the only thing that grows is this rice. There's no other secondary vegetation. And we have found that our waterfowl don't particularly like this hybrid rice. Like they will fly. She flew 22 miles every night to go eat in a conventional rice field instead of eating in this hybrid rice that was very close to where she was staying, in the day. And so that's another issue because, and when they do farm this particular, like I said, this Roundup ready rice, there's no other vegetation in there. It's like, I call it obsessive and compulsive farming because there's, it's completely spotless. And so that has had an impact. That is even less of good habitat in Louisiana. The next thing is we have much more acreage crawfish farms. And crawfish farms, it sounds like, oh, that would be great for birds, but it's not because the water is way too deep. It's not the ideal depth for birds, for waterfowl. And these fishermen, these crawfishing people will do everything they can to keep birds out of their. They have laser light shows now that they do to keep them out. They have air cannons. It sounds like, the Battle of Gettysburg is going on 24 hours a day. So they can't access that either. And so what they're left with is basically some leftover habitat that's not really that good. The marsh that we do have left that hasn't eroded or subsided is not good habitat. Mottled ducks is a duck that's pretty much native to Louisiana, and we've lost a tremendous amount of habitat for them. And I don't know how that's going to recover because you can't make more land. So there's the biggest impact right now on waterfowl in Louisiana is a loss of habitat. And the habitat that we do have left is not nearly the quality that it needs to be. So we're trying to address that. One of the things we do when we do our telemetry work is we ground truth. So wherever these birds go that have telemetry devices on, we will go and take samples of that particular field so that we can have that into our data, so that we'll know why they're going to this field or not going to this field. And that'll help us, after we do a analysis, to figure out what is the preferred type of habitat that they want so that we can make more of it.
That's fascinating. Here I was thinking like levees and the way that we're controlling water systems would have a big impact, but you're talking about the farming.
Farming is huge. Yeah, and I don't know, hey, your husband's from Franklin. What do they farm in Franklin? Sugar cane.
Oh, yes.
Sugar cane is not good habitat for waterfowl at all. Yeah. And so much farm acreage has been taken from grain farming, like, not only rice farming, but like regular grains like soybeans and corn and that kind of stuff has been. A lot of the big farmers have transferred over to farming sugarcane, and a lot of people don't know this, but when you farm sugarcane, that's all you farm. Like if you farm soybeans, you can also farm corn and wheat with that. But if you farm if you farm sugarcane, that's very specialized equipment. That's all you're going to farm, and you locked in. So when that acreage goes from a grain to sugarcane, it's not coming back. And there's been a lot more acreage involved in sugarcane in the state of Louisiana than ever before. And it's still growing. So that's another loss of habitat. So agricultural practices have had an impact on the habitats for waterfowl. But I would say it's second to the loss of land, loss to coastal erosion and subsidence.
That's fascinating. I was made fun of for saying how tall the corn was down there. And it turned out it wasn't corn, it was sugar cane. So thank you, Miss Elizabeth, for answering
my question. Well, you know what? You just tell those people, tell them to call me and I'll straighten them out, okay? I'm not having anybody making fun of my Louisiana spouses.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So just so everybody knows, I was fact-checked by about 3 people. Canada does have a Canada Goose season. As soon as I said that, I knew I was wrong, and I was like, wait a sec, I'm pretty sure. So that's the problem with doing things live, is maybe if you're not sure, don't say it as a host.
Well, it's okay. I knew you weren't 100% committed.
But thank you to those people who were sending me the information. I really appreciate that. Last question to Miss Marvel. Go ahead. Thank you for being patient. Over to Goddess of Nebula, Miss Marvel.
Oh.
Yep, you're there. You just got to unmute yourself to speak.
Oh.
Technical difficulties, maybe?
It looks like it.
Okay, well, 100 technical difficulties. Okay. Elizabeth, I think that's all for the questions today. Thank you for giving us an extra half an hour here of questions and answer.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm just so thrilled that people are, interested in it.
Oh, this has been absolutely fascinating. I love everything that you've talked about tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving up your time to talk about gators and ducks. Make sure you're following Elizabeth. She posts pictures when she's not like slogging through the I accidentally muted you, Elizabeth. I pressed the wrong button. I was scrolling. Yeah, make sure. So I guess just to recap, make sure you're following Elizabeth. She posts a lot of really cool pictures, and I hope things continue in the future with you. Great with all of your science. You'll have to unmute yourself to speak, Elizabeth. I accidentally muted you. Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go. I got
There
it.
we go. Yeah,
Okay, sorry about it.
I accidentally pressed the nuclear button, which I
Oh,
mute
that's all
everybody.
right. But
Yeah.
no, thank you. I really enjoyed, all the questions, and I'm just thrilled that people are actually interested in this because, it has a lot to do with our entire Earth. So I did want to say one thing real quick. We also have comrade in Japan that is doing the same telemetry work on geese over there, and they're similar to the geese we have here. So not only will we have the 8-year, seasonal work data that we can have, but we will also have some from on the other side of the Earth. So it's going to be really interesting what we find out.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm going to keep creeping your profile with your permission, with all of your
Go
posts
ahead.
and all of the science that you do. Thanks for showing up. Thanks to all the speakers with their great questions and the patience to wait to ask, and for the people that direct messaged. We have our second space on Saturday. That's the InstaBunsandBeaks chat. Come listen, ask questions about Bunsen and Beaker. We're going to have stories then. And you can share your own stories about your pets. And then next week, we have an environmental scientist, somebody who specializes in environmental science. So yeah.
That's going to be great.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll shut things down. You got to get up early in the morning, Elizabeth. Thank you again for giving up your time.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to everyone else. I really enjoyed it.